It's a great pleasure to be with you and sit with you and talk with you tonight. Make some old good friends I haven't seen in a long time, and I've been a Dharma sister with Sharon. Where did you go, Sharon? There she is. I've been hearing about, actually I think I heard her first on a tape of a talk to this Sangha, this community, and so you've been in my consciousness for a long time. It's great to be here. I left Boston this morning. It was 27 degrees and frozen solid. So I was very happy to see your trees and the light green trees, beautiful. It's like spanning different worlds. So I'd like to begin just taking a moment for each of us to call to mind an important relationship in your life. Could be someone here, someone somewhere else, someone who's already passed, someone from a long time ago, but a relationship that's in your heart, that's present with you. Could be something that's very confusing or stuck at this moment, or something very precious to you that you're growing, or that you're perplexed about how to grow better. And I'd like you just to hold that relationship in mind right now. All of us are struggling not only with ourselves, but with each other in this life. So, and I want to dedicate this talk and this time together tonight to the healing and liberation that's possible in relationship. I often say in my own life that relationships are both the source of a lot of suffering, because they matter a lot to me, and also a source of liberation and healing. Some of my most profound moments of this life were the kind of mind states that we cultivate in meditation have actually arisen in relationship. And that's not something we talk a lot about. We talk about maybe how we can develop mind states and bring them to our relationships, but actually cultivating those, sometimes they're naturally occurring, sometimes we cultivate them, but mindfulness in relationship, compassion in relationship, this has been the area that I've been really doing a lot of investigating. How is relational practice possible? What is that? And can our meditation practice really include that? We often think of relationship as something alone on the cushion facing the internal world. And I would just like to offer us the possibility, and Sharon kind of began tonight, that our practice can really expand out, and that it's possible to practice in relationship. And very specifically, when people have an intentional or a shared intention to practice together, it is possible to practice meditation together and to really explore the possibility of the power of our connectedness to really accelerate awakening, spiritual awakening. So that's really what I most want to offer. And I teach a form of meditation called Insight Dialogue. That's actually where I met Sharon. And this is a form of a co-meditative practice where if you went on a retreat, the entire retreat would be in silence except on the cushion. It kind of turns everything around. And we get an opportunity to contemplate together and to cultivate mindfulness together, and see what that's like, to offer that to each other. We do this in life all the time, that when one person can really be present and mindful, it brings a quality to the relationship that offers that to each other. And when people are actually practicing that together, there's an acceleration of those mind states, and that we're just beginning to really tap that potential for spiritual awakening. So it's, I have been studying relationships my whole life since I was born, I guess, and formally as a psychologist, looking at the healing power of relationship, realizing that it's a whole realm of being with and interacting, mutuality. These are words, but the actual study and practice of what does it mean to be in right, especially in right relationship. What's possible? How little we really know about that and have brought care and attention to that. So that's my work right now. And the meditation practice that I'm really interested in is relational practice. There are meditative guidelines, and there's a flow in my life and in my meditation practice that I'm hoping I can share some with you between the internal, what we're used to, the sort of silent internal that we practice tonight, and the possibility of a fully engaged practice, including speaking and listening, our great human gift. So when we have established a practice internally, in silence, we can have this next step, in a sense, of expanding that fully into relationship. And when two or more people are practicing together, there's something very, very unique that can happen. So my own story, I'm just going to tell you a little bit of how I've recently done this project of writing about the relational path and relational practice. And the way that it has started is the story of the Buddha's wife, the path of awakening together. And I knew, for those of you, how many of you know the story as it's come down historically of the Buddha's life and how he left on the night of his only son's birth to seek enlightenment, and he left the relationships and went off to the homeless life by himself. And the iconic picture of the Buddha is sitting under the tree alone. And that iconic image is just extraordinarily inspiring. I was recently working with some teenagers at risk in Boston, and I had a Buddha, and I passed it around to all the kids to say what qualities shone through. And it was just so beautiful. This is an icon that of peacefulness, of tranquility, of wisdom, of great compassion. The kids also said purity, responsibility. Really interesting word. But that statue, that icon, really has transmitted a quality of being through the centuries. The iconic image I'm also trying to work with is the epigram of the book, The Buddha's Wife. And in my story, this is not anything about the Buddha, whatever, he has made an enormous gift to the world. It's not about him leaving his wife, but it's about what happened after he left. For years, I felt a little uneasy about the story, and then I started to think, what actually happened when he left? And there are only a very few things known about the women around the Buddha. His wife, Yashodhara, and mother, Pajapati, his adopted mother. But we also know that she raised her son, and when the Buddha returned home 7 years later, I think, she helped the son to, quote, seek his inheritance, which was he became a young monk and left with the Buddha. The story, it's a very patriarchal story of he who goes forth alone to become the great hero, and then to return the great teacher, the great one. The parable of the Buddha, the story, not the teachings, is a spiritual parable. It's to teach, stories teach about a life, and they're meant for a purpose, to teach something. So in my story, the book begins when Yashodhara wakes up to find the Buddha gone. And it's the story of her cry in grief. What happened? Ultimately, what really inspired me was the story of the women of the palace, including the wife and mother, who were, after many, many years, asking the Buddha if they could become members of his Sangha as nuns. And it's said that he refused twice. And the women decided to take things in their own hands and shaved their heads and went homeless. Walked to where the Buddha was and said, "We're here." So for me, the question was, how did she go from being an abandoned wife in traumatic grief to this vital community of women who went forth together? The image of the Buddha going forth alone and they going together. Is it possible to awaken together? Thich Nhat Hanh says the next Buddha may be the Sangha. So rather than the great one, what is it, community and relationality, that may be a field of awakening? And the epigram of the book, when the Buddha comes home, there's this wonderful scene to imagine, this is fiction, how they encountered each other after all these years. And she tells him about their path of awakening in relationship, and he listens to her in the book. And she says to him, "Dear one, what might have been of benefit? What teachings and practices offered had two or more sat together under the Bodhi tree?" So the icon I'd like to leave you with, just as an alternative, is two or more together. And the question, what practices, what would the teachings have been like? There might have been a whole other. And today we have that opportunity to start really investigating, and I call it the Buddha's wife's path is coming into aliveness in our world, and it's totally necessary and needed, that the challenges of our world today so require Sangha and community and really strong, committed relationships to stand in this world, to stand together for another way of living in this crazy world. So one of the things that community practice, the ultimate sort of the relational path is where the Buddha met suffering with mindfulness and compassion internally. When the Buddha's wife cries out in agony when she sees he's gone, his mother comes to her, responds, shows up as a human being. This was inspired by the female Buddha, the Kuan Yin, she who hears the cries of suffering and comes, no matter where that person is, she will come. That suffering brings compassion in relationship. How could that path become community based on compassion? The meeting of suffering, the Four Noble Truths. The part of the book I'd really like to share with you for some opportunity to answer that question, what might some of the practices look like, is called, I call it the devotional path, the ordinary devotional path, which really characterized my life and a lot of people I know, where there is a deep commitment to particular people in our lives. The relationships of mothers to children, siblings, couples, friends. And I call this the devotional path, not to a great teacher, but to other humans. where there's a great particularity, and that is often the ground of our lives. How can we practice to make those relationships source of awakening? That is really my question. In the devotional path, there's a kind of shifting to these ordinary relationships becoming a field of practice in some way, a field of, there's a kind of beginning to create intentionality and sacredness. One of the things that really moved me was thinking about the mother who makes a vow for life to be present for their child to the best of their ability, to be present. This is an incredible vow that many of us make without knowing it. It's a vow. But if it were a monastic vow, it might be really celebrated in the world. As it is, it's kind of hidden and ordinary, and I would really like to lift up the ordinary to give it its sacred due, and to really see how we can fully illuminate our relational practice in our lives. So I think about, the book is I'll read you one or two things from the book. This is where Yashodhara, the wife, is beginning to understand that her devotional practice to her son and others in her circle could expand to encompass the arising of life to the vanishing of life, letting in and letting go, the being with birth and being with death. So this is the path of accompaniment of others from life through birth, from birth to death. The whole universal circle. In sitting with and being with her mother, she committed herself to being mindful, present, earnestly awake through each moment of the dying process. She felt herself stretching, expanding to hold this great arc of life, privileged to be held in her own circle, glad to be called forth, to be able to be with both her son and her mother ardently. I made a vow to be a beneficial presence for these particular others on this shared life journey. I understood how this vow resonated with the lives of the other women in our circle, the journey at the core and span of each life, the unique yet ordinary stories of the women accompanying parents, children, spouses, partners, and friends through life had a universal resonance, the life journey of accompaniment, walking with as a relational practice from birth to death, became a spiritual path, the ordinary devotional path held in the larger circle. Under these conditions, the particular opens to the universal. In the ordinary can blossom the extraordinary. The ordinary can open the door to the extraordinary. I understood that what we were touching every day in the sacred circle was the practice of accompanying, staying with, being with, and walking with a shared intention. Even when difficult, this practice cultivates the soil and creates the ripe conditions for awakening. So that's the devotional practice, and I'm going to speak briefly about sort of what Thich Nhat Hanh calls the 4 love mantras, which I would think of as relational practices. And they're really 4 aspects of the way that the meditative practice can culminate in this relational path. He calls these the relational mantras, which are kind of whole-bodied, wholehearted phrases and words that actually can become taken into the body-mind and emblazoned in some really important way as an intention. So the first mantra, these are practices of accompaniment, and I'd like you to just think a little bit about how they might be playing out in your life right now. The 4 mantras or ways of being with. The first one is, and these are the words that Thich Nhat Hanh uses, dear one. I am here for you. I am present with you. The first part of that, dear one, is very, very touching to me. It's really right, loving speech. And you can think, how do you address the important people in your life? How do you address yourself when you talk to yourself internally? Probably not dear one. I actually ask people in practice to think about a way they could call themselves lovingly and call others lovingly, to just simply begin the relational encounter in a loving way with words that inspire love. And even if you don't feel it, sometimes even using the words help bring that feeling too. But remember to be kind and gentle. Think about a name you call yourself and just substitute one of the bad ones and substitute a loving one. So dear one, I am here for you. I am present with you. What this speaks to is presence. It speaks to the quality we're really cultivating when we sit together of actually being here in this moment and then offering that presence to another. It's interesting being for and being with. I've spent a lot of time in life thinking about what does it actually mean to be with or to sit with another. It's not just sitting next to each other. Something really happens in the withness when we can really communicate that I'm with you. With, to me, being with is one of the most profound relational practices we can do. And we do it all the time, but what I'm saying is we can really deepen and cultivate this practice. And it is a fruit of the meditation practice, but it's extended into relationship. The second mantra is, dear one, I see you and it makes me happy. Of an aspect of our relationship, to speak lovingly, to really be able to say, I see you in your particularity. I know your goodness. I know your struggle. I see who you are. I see your beauty. And it makes me happy to be able to cultivate joy in relationship. And it may not be filled with joy, most aren't, but to be able to really cultivate that joy is quite an ardent practice, relational practice. And it's really starting to hold the relationship as joyful and happy, to be able to find that. This is not easy for most of us, but this is where we're heading, is cultivating a mind of happiness with another person in the relationship. The third mantra is, dear one, I see your suffering and I am here for you. This is what we learn in the Four Noble Truths. There's suffering, and that if we turn towards the suffering, not away, we can begin to be freer of suffering. And in this case, relationally, when we offer our presence and our care for the suffering of another, and make some kind of intentional commitment to that, this is really an extraordinary gift of human relationship. It doesn't mean I do it perfectly or I know how to make your suffering better. It's just saying I'm here with you. I care and I'm here. And I know. And the fourth mantra is, dear one, I am suffering. Please help me. And this is one of the ones that's most hard, right? Is to really be able to ask for help, to be vulnerable. Especially if that person is the one you think is causing it. But there's a humility cultivated in this practice, and a willingness to be vulnerable, and in mutuality, I'm here for you and I need you too. Nobody is the one always giving, and much of our meditation practice is cultivating loving kindness and cultivating compassion for others, but we don't have as much practice with sitting in our own vulnerability and showing that to each other and asking for help. And so the relational practice really is about mutuality and about that capacity to not only ask but to receive. Sometimes it's right there. The practice of receiving care and love and service. We talk a lot about giving, but it's actually just as important to receive, because unless you receive, the other person can't give. It's reciprocity. So the actual practice of receiving, deeply taking in when something is offered, is also a part of this relational practice. So I just wanted to give you a sense of how we might begin to practice in actual relationships. Obviously, you're not going to, you might sit down and say, I'm going to take a half an hour right now to really give to this relationship and to see if what of these mantras, I'm here, I'm present, where are we? But offering the presence and receiving the presence back. Cultivating joy, and just simply, how do you cultivate joy with another person? Doing certain things, remembering certain things. Giving certain things to that person that will make them joyful, and then being able to receive that joy back. Cultivating joy and happiness is quite extraordinary. And when I write in the book about spiritual friendship and spiritual partnerships, when there's a shared intention to practice together, when there's an agreement to set aside the time to work on these things together, in an intentional way, the fruits of these practices can really flower. I have a person I've been sitting with and sharing with for 30 years, once a week. We've made that commitment to each other. It started, we didn't know we were going to make a 30-year commitment, but it's grown over time. And it's really been a source of We practice, we sit together on the cushion, we practice insight dialogue with each other, with words, we contemplate together, and we just kind of help each other remember where the path is to what's really important, what do we really need to kind of keep walking on the path to kind of find it again. I always feel she'll say to me, I need to talk to you. I need to talk to you because I need to remember who I am and what I'm up to in this world. And sometimes we lose that, and we can hold that for each other too. So these are, I'm just giving you a little sort of sense of the whole arena of relational practice and its application or its fulfillment or its even new practices, meditative practices that, on this relational path. And I ultimately believe that the relational and the internal flow and inter-are with each other. They don't, each one informs the other. But so far, the meditative practices as we've been working with in the Buddhist tradition have really focused more on the internal and the relationship with oneself. And I think there's a lot fruit from expanding that relationally. So I'm going to stop. There's a few more minutes, and if anybody would like to comment, I would love to share with you for just a moment or two. And meanwhile, the relationship that you called to mind, and I first ask you to do that, to just think now about what your intention might be with those mantras that you might be able to hold in your heart and see and let it be realized in life at some point? To enter fresh and renew, the renewal of beginning anew, just like we begin anew with each breath. How do we bring that renewal and newness into our relationships? So might just take a moment to revisit that and hold some intention. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I could have looked that up, Googled that, right? But it's a story that has disturbed me forever. That the enlightenment of the Buddha came at the cost of abandoning
Yeah.
the household, as it were, and of course, those who hold the house. In that case,
Mm-hmm.
things were often meaning the mother, and I just really appreciate that that's where you started your talk and your story about the wisdom that's in that ordinary household
Mm-hmm.
and relationship.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's quite wonderful and healing for me to write it, actually. Two things I want to say. I wrote it with my partner, who's not here tonight, but it was kind of like we were going to show up and do it together relationally. It felt right for the book to do that. So I wish he were here too, because it's very much for men as much as women. The other thing is that it's an old kind of feminist perspective of looking at whose voice is not being heard in the story. And when you look at that voice, perhaps there's something really important that's being missed in the whole story, whether that's the woman's voice, whether that's the voice of people of color in our culture, or more marginalized, silenced, or invisible. And that the notion is that when you bring that voice forth, you learn things. It contributes perspectives that might not have been at all seen. And that we can't know reality until all of those visions and voices are represented in our community. So it's not just for the women, it's really for the whole, perhaps, of this whole. The tradition has been really carried by male monastics, and I think it's now growing in very many new ways, and I think this is one of the most fruitful and exciting and relevant. Yeah, thanks. Anyone else?
I'm curious about when in the relationship when in a relationship one person practices and the other doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have a view on this, or maybe how and then practicing meditation to try to improve the one that is not practicing?
One person is a practitioner and another is not, and how?
It is still a relationship.
It's still a relation, absolutely. And I mean, sort of, there's a huge gift of a practitioner everywhere in our lives to offer that quality of mind to whomever. I mean, therapists offer that. Hopefully, practicing therapists where you don't have to necessarily teach the practice to. And I do think that often when somebody really does see the value and see the gift, sometimes offering ways to help practice and together. And it can be in very small ways. It can be, people ask a lot about children too. How do you create a family sangha? Just sitting together in a special place, or just contemplating certain things together, ringing a bell and playing There are many ways to open the field without it being formal practice, I think. But I do think even asking someone to please do that for us, that it would really enrich the relationship, to at least give that a try, is worth doing. So I think let's just take a moment and cultivate energy and joy, and to go forth into our lives. Grateful for this opportunity to be together and offering this practice and this vision to the well-being and the benefit of all.
Dear one, thank you so much for your offering and for really including in our circle this dimension of practice. It's really been inspiring and lovely. Thank you. And for you, dear ones, blessings on your journey home, and also remember the Dana basket. Thank you.